The winter of 1873 was a killer. It came for the weak, the unprepared, the unlucky. And Margaret Sullivan was all three. Her shawl was a ghost of a garment, useless against a wind that carried the teeth of wolves. Her boots, worn to paper, crunched on the snow that was trying to bury the whole of Nebraska. 3 days she'd been walking. 3 days since she'd clawed a shallow grave out of the frozen ground for the last piece of her life. Cholera. It had a hunger that couldn't be satisfied. It took her husband James in a fevered sweat. Then it came for their little girl, Emma. She was 5. The disease burned through their settlement, leaving a forest of wooden crosses where homes used to be. The landlord didn't care about crosses. He wanted rent. She had nothing. So she walked. She walked away from the empty cabin, the tiny graves, the broken promise of a life in the West. Now there was only the white, endless nothing. The sky was a sheet of lead. The trees were skeletons clawing at the clouds. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her fingers, wrapped in strips of her own petticoat, were numb, useless things. Each step was a war. Each breath was a shard of ice in her lungs. She thought of James, his rough hands and the gentle way he touched her face. He'd promised her a new world, land of their own, a future. They'd left everything in Ohio for that dream. Now she was 24, a widow, a mother with no child, alone. The sun was a pale smear in the sky, already giving up. She needed shelter, but the prairie offered nothing. No soddy, no thicket, not even a ditch to curl up in and die. The thought didn't scare her anymore. What was left to live for? Her foot caught on something hidden by the snow. A root, a rock. She pitched forward, catching herself on hands that felt nothing. When she tried to push herself up, her legs quit. The exhaustion she'd been holding at bay for days finally broke through the dam and crashed over her in a great silent wave. She got to her knees, then just fell, sideways into the soft, cold powder. Her body curled into a ball on its own. "Just a moment," she whispered to the wind. "Just a moment's rest." But she knew. You don't get up from a rest like this. The cold was becoming a strange kind of warm, a comforting blanket. She could almost smell her mother's bread baking. She could almost hear Emma's laughter, bright and clear, carried on the wind. Her eyes drifted shut. Through the fog, she heard a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the wind. It was the soft whinny of a horse, the creak of saddle leather, footsteps, crunching in the snow, steady, coming closer. She forced her eyes open. Ice crystals on her lashes fractured the world into 1,000 pieces. A figure stood over her, a dark silhouette against the dying light. Long hair, a weathered face, clothes of hide and fur, an Indian, an Apache. The words surfaced in her dying mind. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. The stories, the warnings they gave every woman at the fort, whispered through her thoughts like ghosts, scalpings, captives, a fate worse than death. But fear was a luxury she could no longer afford. Her lips moved, a faint whisper against the wind. The widow collapsed in the cold. It made no sense. A fragment of her own story, spoken to the man she'd been taught was her greatest enemy. Her eyes closed. The darkness rushed in, and this time, she welcomed it. The Apache warrior, Kuruk, stood over the woman. She was thin as a winter doe, her face a mask of hunger and grief. The snow was already claiming her, dusting her worn dress like a shroud. He could leave her. It was the smart thing to do. The whites were a plague on his people. They brought broken treaties, disease, and death. They drove his people from the lands the spirits had given them. But she hadn't screamed. In her last moment of consciousness, she'd looked at him not with terror, but with a strange, empty acceptance. It stayed his hand. He dismounted his painted mare, who snorted at the faint scent of death hanging in the air. He knelt, pressing 2 fingers to the woman's neck. A pulse. Faint, but there. With a practiced ease that spoke of a life of hardship, he lifted her. She weighed nothing. A bundle of sticks and sorrow. He wrapped her in his own thick buffalo hide blanket, still warm from his body, and secured her on his horse. The mare shifted, but a quiet word settled her. He led the horse on foot as the twilight deepened into a bruised purple. The storm was getting worse. He knew a place, a shallow cave in a rocky outcropping that jutted from the plains like the spine of some great dead beast. It would have to do. Inside, it was shielded from the worst of the wind. He'd used it before on hunts. There was still a small cache of dry firewood tucked in the back. He carried the woman inside and laid her gently on a bed of pine needles. He coaxed a fire to life, its flames pushing back the shadows. In the flickering light, he studied her. The firelight softened the harsh lines of suffering on her face. She might have been beautiful once. He took dried meat and herbs from his pack and began to make a thin broth. She would need it if she woke. The cold had taken many this winter, Apache and white alike. He would do what he could. It was the way of his people. You offered help to those in need, even if they would offer you only a bullet in return. He knew he was inviting trouble. A white woman was a dangerous thing to possess in this land. But as the storm howled outside, such thoughts seemed far away. All that mattered was the simple act of keeping another human being alive through the long, dark night. Margaret's first sensation was warmth, a deep, impossible warmth that soaked into her bones. She opened her eyes. The world was soft, orange, flickering, stone walls, a fire. This wasn't her cabin. This wasn't anywhere she knew. Then memory flooded back. The snow, the falling, the dark figure. She tried to sit up and the cave spun. Nausea slammed into her, and she fell back onto a bed of soft pine needles and fur. That's when she saw him. He was sitting on the other side of the fire watching her. The Indian. Terror, cold and sharp, lanced through her. Every horror story she had ever heard screamed in her mind. She scrambled backward, pressing herself against the cold stone of the cave wall, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. The man didn't move. He just watched, his face a sculpture of shadow and light. He reached for something beside him, a wooden bowl. His movements were slow, deliberate. He held it out to her. Her stomach cramped at the smell of food, but she shook her head, pulling the fur blanket up to her chin like a shield. "Stay back," she croaked. He placed the bowl on the ground between them and retreated. He pointed a finger at the bowl, then at her. Then he made a gesture she understood instantly. "Eat." She scanned the cave. No escape. The wind was still shrieking outside. She was too weak to even stand. Where would she go? He seemed to read her thoughts. He pointed to the cave entrance, then made a sweeping gesture at the storm and shook his head. No escape that way. Then he pointed to himself. He pressed a hand to his chest. "Kuruk." He said the name again, then pointed to her, his expression questioning. It took her a moment to understand. He was telling her his name. The simple human act of it cut through her fear. "Margaret," she whispered. "Margaret Sullivan." He nodded, a slow, solemn gesture. Then he pushed the bowl an inch closer to her and turned his attention back to the fire. The smell of the broth was a torment. Her hunger finally won the war against her fear. With a trembling hand, she reached for the bowl. She drank it in desperate gulps. It was warm and rich with herbs she didn't recognize. When she looked up, ashamed, he was already preparing another for her. This time she took it with a mumbled, "Thank you." As she ate the second bowl, she studied him. He was younger than she first thought, maybe 30. His face was strong, his eyes intelligent. His clothes were well made, decorated with intricate beadwork. A long knife was sheathed at his belt, but he seemed to have forgotten it was there. He radiated a calm patience, not threat. If he'd meant her harm, he'd had every chance while she was unconscious. He'd brought her to shelter. He'd built a fire. He'd fed her. The truth of his actions warred with a lifetime of prejudice. "Why?" she asked, her voice stronger now. "Why did you help me?" He didn't understand. She gestured at herself, at the cave. "Why? Save me?" A flicker of something, maybe amusement, crossed his face. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his English halting but clear. "You need help. I help, is way of my people." Tears pricked her eyes. When was the last time anyone had shown her such simple, unconditional kindness? "Your people?" she asked softly. "Apache," he said. He looked surprised that she knew the word. "Mescalero Apache." "I've heard stories," she said, and couldn't bring herself to say what kind. "Ah," he said. The single sound was heavy with understanding. Stories. White men like stories. They fell into a silence broken only by the crackle of the fire. She pulled the blanket tighter. She should have been dead. She would be dead if not for this man, this supposed enemy. Your family will worry, she said, the words feeling hollow and strange. No, he said, shaking his head. Storm, 2, 3 days, then safe to travel. He gestured around the cave. We wait. 3 days, alone in a cave with an Apache warrior. The thought should have terrified her, but it didn't. She just nodded. She had nowhere to go, no one to return to. My family is dead, she heard herself say. The words were flat, empty things. Cholera, my husband, my daughter. He listened, his dark eyes never leaving her face. When she was finished, he said, I understand. My family, also gone. He paused. Soldiers come. Many die. Wife, son. He touched his chest, a brief, sharp gesture. Long time now, but still here. He tapped his heart. Margaret saw him then, not as a savage, not as an Indian, but as a man, like her, who had been hollowed out by grief. The firelight revealed the sorrow etched into his face, a sorrow he carried with a quiet dignity that shamed her own wild despair. I'm sorry, she said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. He inclined his head. Life brings sorrow, also brings new days. You live, you continue, is all we can do. The simple words hit her with the force of a physical blow. You live, you continue. For months, she had been doing neither. The thought of continuing on had seemed like an impossible burden. She realized then she had to trust this man, Kuruk. For the next few days, her life was in his hands. The thought was no longer terrifying. It was something else. She felt safe. Thank you, she said again, putting everything she had into the words, for saving me. He studied her for a moment, then rose from his place by the fire. He pulled another blanket from his pack, a beautifully woven wool one, and set it beside her with a water skin. Sleep, he said. You are. Very sick from cold. Need rest. Where will you sleep? She asked, suddenly worried. He gestured to the mouth of the cave. I watch. Keep fire burning. You safe. He settled himself near the entrance, his rifle across his knees. He was going to stand guard, all night, protecting a stranger, an enemy. She lay back, pulling the blankets around her. For the first time since she'd stood over those 2 small graves, she didn't pray for death to take her in the night. Tomorrow would come. But tonight, she was warm and fed, and she was not alone. As sleep pulled her under, she watched his silhouette against the fire, a lone guardian against the storm. The world had taken everything from them both. Yet here they were. And just before the darkness took her, she realized something that sent a shiver down her spine. He had saved her life, yes. But what if he had no intention of ever letting her go? The next morning, the storm had quieted to a whisper. Margaret woke to find Kuruk already tending the fire. He handed her a pair of fur-lined moccasins. Your shoes no good, he said. These better. They were small, delicately made. His wife's. The thought sent a pang through her, but she slipped them on. They were warm and fit well enough. They ventured out into a world of blinding white. Kuruk moved with a quiet confidence, showing her how to walk in his footprints to save energy, how to spot the faint trail of a snowshoe hare. He pointed to plants poking through the snow, naming them in his language, explaining their uses. Medicine, food, fire starter. She tried to repeat the strange, musical words, and he almost smiled. You learn quick, he said. I have to, she replied. And then, surprising herself, she added, I want to. As they gathered wood, a distant howl split the air. Wolves. She froze. Kuruk touched her arm. Not close, and he said, They hunt. We are safe. His calm certainty was a balm to her frayed nerves. Back in the cave, he began preparing a meal. Teach me, she said suddenly. He looked at her surprised. White women do not learn Apache ways. This white woman does, she said firmly. I have nothing left of my old life. I need to learn new ways to live a new one. He nodded slowly. I teach. The lesson was in gestures and quiet words. He was a patient teacher. As they ate, the stories she had locked away began to spill out. She told him about Ohio, about meeting James, about Emma's love for wildflowers. He listened, his eyes never leaving hers. She would have been 6 next month, Margaret said, her voice cracking. She had James's eyes. She couldn't finish. Kuruk was silent for a long time. Then he spoke. My son, 4 winters, when soldiers come, he was very brave, tried to protect his mother. Kuruk's jaw tightened. Too small to fight men with guns. The shared grief was a physical thing between them, a bridge of pain connecting 2 different worlds. Margaret reached out and covered his hand with her own. He went still, looking at her pale skin against his. Then he turned his hand over and briefly clasped her fingers. Sorrow shared is smaller, he said. That evening, as another storm gathered, he sat across the fire from her. Tomorrow, if storm breaks, we check trap lines, he said. You need better clothes if you stay in mountains. If you stay, the words hung in the air. The thought of returning to the white world, to the judgment and the pity, made her stomach clench. I have nowhere to go, she said quietly. No family, no home. He nodded. Mountains are hard, but mountains do not judge. You survive storm. Maybe you strong enough. Will you teach me, she asked, to be strong enough? He met her gaze. You already strong, just need to remember how. Later, as she lay wrapped in blankets, listening to the new storm rage, she heard the sound of a flute, a low, haunting melody that spoke of loss, but also of resilience. It was Kuruk, playing by the mouth of the cave. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt a flicker of something she had thought was dead forever. Hope. But then a new chilling thought crept in. He was teaching her his ways, sharing his grief, keeping her alive. Was he making her strong for the mountains, or was he making her strong enough to be his? On the 4th day, their supplies were low. Kuruk spoke of a hidden valley, 2 days' walk to the south. Hard travel, he warned, looking at her. You sure you're strong enough? I have to be, she said. They set out into a world of sharp, crystalline light. The going was brutal. By midday, Margaret's legs were shaking. During a rest, her foot slipped on an icy root. She went down hard, a sharp, searing pain shooting up her ankle. Kuruk was beside her in an instant. Not broken, he said after a moment, but you cannot walk on it. I can walk, she insisted, trying to stand. The pain drove her back down. Without a word, he adjusted his pack, turned and crouched in front of her. I carry you. No, I couldn't. You want to freeze again? Come. The logic was inescapable. She allowed him to lift her onto his back. His strength was effortless. The warmth of his body seeped through their clothes, a startling, intimate heat. She tried to hold herself stiff, but exhaustion soon made her relax against him, her head resting on his shoulder. They came to a frozen stream. The ice looked thin, treacherous. Put me down, she said. I can crawl. He shook his head. Ice might break. Instead, he spent precious time building a makeshift bridge of fallen branches, testing each step before trusting it with their combined weight. As he carried her across, she could hear the ice groaning beneath them. She buried her face against his neck, holding her breath until they were safely on the other side. That night, they found shelter in a half-collapsed trapper's lean-to. As he worked to make it habitable, she watched him, the fluid grace of his movements, the quiet competence. Why are you doing all this? She asked. He stopped his work. My grandmother told a story about a spider who saved a fallen eagle by weaving a web to catch him. She said we are all sometimes the spider and sometimes the eagle. The world stays whole when we remember how to be both. Tears pricked Margaret's eyes. I've been the eagle for too long, just falling. Now you learn to be spider, he said. Make your own web. That night, the cold forced them to lie close together for warmth. She could hear his heart beating, steady and strong. It had been so long since she'd felt the simple comfort of another person. Her body betrayed her, and she began to tremble, not from cold, but from a deep, aching need for connection, for touch, for proof that she was still alive. His arm came around her, pulling her close. It wasn't a passionate gesture, but a protective one. "Is good to cry," he said into the darkness. "Tears wash the heart, make room for new things." She let the tears come then, for James, for Emma, for the life she had lost, and for the kindness of this man who asked for nothing. A wolf howled in the distance, a lonely sound answered by another. She wasn't afraid of it anymore. She understood the need to call out into the emptiness and hear a voice answer back. "Kuruk," she whispered. "Thank you for being my spider." She felt him smile in the darkness. "Tomorrow, you start weaving." She relaxed against him, the steady rhythm of his breathing lulling her to sleep. She had lost everything. But as she drifted off, warm and safe in his arms, she realized he had given her something new, a reason to see tomorrow. But as she slept, she had a terrible dream. She dreamt of another woman's moccasins, a beautiful medicine bundle, and a haunting flute song. And she realized with a jolt of terror that she was not the first woman he had brought to this wilderness. The valley was a secret paradise. Shielded from the wind, warmed by the sun, a small stream cut through its heart. And in the center stood a small, sturdy log cabin, abandoned but intact. "Found it 2 winters ago," Kuruk said. "Mountain takes back what is not used." They spent days making it a home. They patched the roof, chinked the logs, and made a bed of fresh pine boughs. They worked side by side, a silent rhythm developing between them. Margaret found herself watching him, the way he moved, the quiet songs he hummed under his breath. One afternoon, sorting their supplies, she found a small beaded leather pouch. She recognized it from the cave. She'd forgotten it. Now she looked closer. The beadwork was intricate, beautiful. "What is this?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Was my wife's, a medicine bundle, for protection." Margaret's hand froze. "I can't take this. It's hers." "Is meant to protect," he said quietly. "You need protection." She would understand. Her name was Ayana, Eternal Blossom. That night she asked him to tell her about his wife. He spoke of a medicine woman's daughter, wise and beautiful, with a laugh like water over stones. He told her how she sang to their son every morning. He told her how she stood before the soldiers, a mountain cat protecting her cub, and how they shot her down without a thought. "She died brave," he said, his voice rough. "Is good death, in Apache way, to die protecting little ones." He looked at Margaret. "You understand? Sometimes death has meaning." Margaret thought of the meaningless, wasting sickness that took her family. "I understand that some deaths have more honor than other," she said. The days settled into a routine that felt dangerously like a life. Mornings checking traps, afternoons working on the cabin, evenings by the fire where he taught her his language, and she told him stories of her world. One evening, a fierce blizzard descended. Trapped inside, huddled by the fire, the wind screaming outside, he asked her about Ohio. She told him about the green hills, the apple blossoms, the small farm that was supposed to be their future. "Why leave such a place?" he asked. "A dream," she said bitterly, "of free land. We didn't know the land would fight us." "Land does not fight," he said. "Land tests. Only the strong survive the test." A sudden crack like a gunshot echoed overhead. A section of the roof gave way, and a torrent of snow and wind poured in. They leaped into action, working together in the chaos to patch the hole with a buffalo hide and loose boards. When it was done, they stood breathless and covered in snow, and Margaret laughed. A real, genuine laugh. He looked at her, and for the first time, he truly smiled. That night, they shared the single bed frame for warmth. Lying side by side in the dark, she could feel the heat from his body. "I used to pray for death," she whispered. Now I think about tomorrow." "It is a beginning," he said. She turned to face him. "Do you ever think about what comes after winter?" He was quiet. "You asking if you are part of my plans?" The directness stole her breath. I suppose I am." His hand found hers under the blankets. "Margaret Sullivan, you are a good woman, strong, but this life," he gestured around them at the wildness, "is a hard life. A lonely life. No proper things for a lady. Proper things didn't save my family, she said, her fingers tightening on his. They didn't keep me from dying in the snow. You did. You are sure? He asked, his voice low. Instead of answering, she leaned in and kissed him. It was soft, uncertain, a question. He went still for a heartbeat. Then his other hand came up to cup her face, and he kissed her back. A kiss of shared sorrow, of dawning hope. I'm sure, she whispered when they broke apart. He pulled her against him, her head on his shoulder, his arms wrapped around her. The storm raged outside, but inside the small cabin, Margaret felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She had found a home in the heart of the man who saved her. But as she drifted to sleep, she couldn't shake a terrifying question. If Crawford, the cruel man from the fort, ever found them, would this new life she was building become Kuruk's death sentence? The peace shattered on a bright February morning. Horses, several of them coming fast. Margaret's blood went cold. She ran for the cabin. Kuruk was already at the door, his face a grim mask, rifle in hand. How many? She whispered. 4, maybe 5. Peering through a crack in the logs, her stomach plummeted. Ben Crawford, a cruel traitor from Fort Kearny who'd tried to court her after James died. And with him were the Garrett brothers, men known for hunting Indians for sport. This was no chance encounter. They're tracking us, Kuruk said, his voice low. Hello, the cabin! Crawford's voice boomed. Come on out, peaceful-like. Kuruk made a decision. He handed Margaret his knife. Stay behind the door, he whispered, no matter what. He stepped outside. This my place, Kuruk said, his voice calm. You go. Crawford grinned, an ugly slash in his bearded face. Well, well, an Apache living high on the hog. Where'd you steal all this from, boy? Not steal, find empty. Funny thing, Crawford said, his hand resting on his pistol. Heard the Sullivan widow went missing in the last big storm. About the same time you were seen in these parts. He looked past Kuruk, his eyes trying to pierce the shadows of the cabin. You wouldn't be hiding someone, would you? Just me, Kuruk said. Then you won't mind if we look inside, Crawford sneered. Might be you got something that belongs to civilized folk. He took a step forward. Kuruk raised his rifle slightly. You go. Crawford laughed. Boys, looks like this one's hostile. He drew his pistol. Kuruk was faster. His shot kicked the pistol from Crawford's hand. Crawford howled, clutching his bloody fingers, and his men raised their rifles. Don't! Margaret burst from the cabin. Don't shoot! He saved my life! The clearing went silent. Crawford stared at her Apache clothes, at the way she stood beside Kuruk. His shock curdled into rage. Margaret Sullivan, he spat, living in sin with a savage. He's a better man than you'll ever be, she shot back. Boys, Crawford said to his men, looks like we got a white woman needs rescuing. It's our Christian duty. I don't need rescuing, Margaret said, moving to stand in front of Kuruk. I choose to be here. No decent woman chooses to bed down with an Apache, Tom Garrett snarled. He's done something to her mind. The only savages I see are you? Margaret's voice rang out. Crawford's face went purple with rage. Take the Apache, he ordered. We'll take Mrs. Sullivan back to town and let the decent folks sort her out. They surged forward. Margaret knew Kuruk couldn't fight them all. Wait, she cried. I'll go with you. Just leave him be. Kuruk shot her a sharp look. No, Margaret. She ignored him. Crawford, you have my word. Let him go, and I'll come quietly. Crawford considered it, then shook his head. Can't do it. He knows where the town is now. Can't have him getting ideas. He's never harmed anyone, Margaret pleaded. Doesn't mercy mean anything to you? Mercy's for Christians, Luke Garrett said, not for heathens who defile white women. The word defile snapped something inside Margaret. The only thing defiled here is your black hearts, she screamed. This man showed me kindness when my own kind left me for dead. I have seen true Christianity in this Apache warrior, and I have seen the devil himself in men like you. Crawford's face twisted in a snarl. Take them both. The fight was short and brutal. Kuruk was overwhelmed by sheer numbers. As they tied his hands, Crawford leaned close to Margaret. You've shamed yourself, woman. Once we're done with your Apache, you'll learn your proper place." She spat in his face. He backhanded her, the blow snapping her head back. They were forced onto horses, their hands tied. As they rode away from the valley, from the small cabin that had become their world, Margaret looked back. Smoke was still curling from the chimney. "Be strong," Kuruk said to her in English, his voice low. "Like mountain." Crawford laughed. "Don't worry, Mrs. Sullivan. We'll burn that heathen talk out of you." But as they rode towards what she knew was not justice but a lynching, Margaret felt no fear, only a cold, hard rage. They thought they had captured a broken widow. They had no idea they were escorting a warrior, and she would burn their world to the ground to save the man she loved. Crawford didn't ride toward Fort Kearny. He led them deeper into the forest, away from any trail, away from any law. "Where are we going?" Margaret demanded. "Shut your mouth," Crawford snarled. They rode for hours, Kuruk silent beside her, his eyes scanning everything, memorizing every rock and tree. As dusk fell, they arrived at a rough hunting camp. Poacher's camp, more like. Pelts were stretched on frames, the ground littered with bones. They were hauled from their horses and tied to separate trees. As the men passed a whiskey bottle around the fire, their talk grew uglier. "Should just kill him now," slurred Tom Garrett, nursing the arm Kuruk had wounded. "Why wait?" "Because," Crawford said, his voice dangerously soft, "I want our Apache friend to watch first. I want him to see what happens when he touches what belongs to white men." "I belong to no one," Margaret said, her voice clear and steady. Crawford crossed to her, his breath sour with whiskey. "Every woman belongs to someone. You gave yourself to this animal, and now you'll pay the price." He slapped her, hard. Across the fire, Kuruk strained against his bonds, a low growl in his throat. "See?" Crawford taunted him. "She's got spirit. We'll break it." As the night deepened, the men grew drunk and careless. Margaret had been working at her ropes, using a trick Kuruk had taught her, twisting and pulling until her wrists were raw. She felt a knot give. Across the camp, she could see Kuruk doing the same. Then a sound from the darkness made the men freeze. A low, guttural growl. A mountain lion. "Just a cat," Crawford said, grabbing his rifle. But the growl came again, closer, and from a different direction. Then a third. The horses began to panic. "That ain't natural," one of the men whispered. "Cats don't hunt in packs." A shadow moved at the edge of the firelight, then another. It wasn't mountain lions. It was Apache warriors materializing from the darkness like ghosts. All hell broke loose. The fight was a blur of motion and violence. Hands cut Margaret's ropes. A young warrior pulled her to her feet. "Kuruk's friend," he said. "Come." She saw Kuruk free, a knife in his hand, but Crawford wasn't done. Bloodied, he'd found another pistol. He aimed it at Kuruk's back. Time slowed to a crawl. "No!" Margaret screamed. She threw herself in front of Kuruk. The shot was a hammer blow to her shoulder, spinning her around and dropping her to the ground. The last thing she saw was Kuruk's face, his eyes wide with horror, his hands pressing down on the hot, spreading wetness on her chest. She heard him call her name, over and over, as the stars above began to spin into a great dark whirlpool. She woke to the smell of herbs and the sound of chanting. She was in a teepee, lying on soft furs. An old Apache woman smiled at her. "Kuruk," Margaret whispered. A moment later he was there, kneeling beside her, his face haggard with worry. "Margaret," he breathed, "you are awake." "The others?" she asked weakly. "Gone," he said. "Some dead, some ran. They will not be back." He took her hand, his touch gentle. "You saved my life, foolish, brave woman." "Just returning a favor," she whispered. "You saved me first." "No," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not even. You took a bullet for me. Why?" She looked into his dark, pained eyes. "Because I love you," she said simply. "Because losing you would be worse than dying." He bowed his head, pressing his forehead against their joined hands. "My people came," he explained after a moment. "They tracked us, brought you here to heal." "Will they hate me?" she asked. "For being white?" "Some are not happy," he admitted. "But the elders. They say you took a warrior's wound for an Apache man. This means something. They say you have an Apache heart and a white body." Over the next few days, as she healed, she was visited by many from the tribe. They were curious, cautious, but not unkind. The medicine woman, Dahlia, taught her about the healing herbs. Then one evening, a beautiful young woman named Nasha came. The way she looked at Kuruk made Margaret's heart ache with a fierce new jealousy. When she left, Margaret asked who she was. Her father wanted us to marry, Kuruk said, before you came. He saw the look on her face and took her hand. My heart was not for her. Now everyone knows my heart is taken. Lying in the teepee that night, Margaret knew she had been tested by fire and ice, by grief and by violence. And she had survived. Whatever the elders decided, this was her life now. Kuruk, she whispered into the dark. Yes, teach me how to say something. What words? She took a breath. Teach me how to say, I am home. She felt his smile in the darkness as he spoke the words, and she repeated them until they were a part of her. Home wasn't a place, it was a person, and now against all odds she was finally there. But she knew that somewhere out in the white man's world, the men who had escaped would be telling their story. And sooner or later, that story would bring the soldiers. Spring came, and with it, the judgment of the tribal council. After 3 days, the eldest chief, Crow Feather, stood before her. You carry a warrior's mark, he said in careful English. You chose our life over your own. To live with us, you must leave your old world behind forever. You become Apache in all but blood. Or you go. My old world is dead, Margaret replied, her voice steady. This is my world now. In a simple ceremony, her hair was cut and burned, and she was given a new name. It's Sachu, Eagle Woman, for her fierce protection of Kuruk. Weeks passed. She moved through the camp with a growing confidence, her skin bronzed by the sun, her hands skilled in Apache ways. Then one morning riders approached, white men, but they carried a white flag. Margaret recognized the man in the lead. Reverend Thomas Morrison, from Fort Kearney. Mrs. Sullivan, the Reverend said, his face filled with relief. Thank God you're alive. Crawford and his men were wanted criminals. There are no charges against you. I've come to take you home. All eyes were on her, the Apache waiting to see if she would abandon them, the white men waiting to rescue her. Reverend, she said, her voice clear, I appreciate your concern, but I am home. The Reverend looked from her to Kuruk, and understanding dawned in his eyes. I see, he said softly. Are you happy? More than I ever thought possible, she said. He sighed. I brought you some things. He handed her a bundle. Letters, photos of James and Emma, her marriage certificate. And this, he said, producing a heavy pouch of coins, the sale of your homestead. It's yours. Margaret looked at the money, then at Chief Crow Feather. Chief, she said, will the tribe accept this? To help your people? The chief's eyes widened. You would give your white man's money to us? The tribe accepted her gift. As the Reverend left, he wished her well. Margaret stood, a relic of her past in her hands, her future standing beside her. Regrets? Kuruk asked. She looked at the photo of her smiling daughter. No regrets, she said. Just memories, good ones I can honor by living fully. That night the tribe celebrated. Margaret sat with the women, learning a new beating pattern. Nasha, who had become a surprising friend, sat beside her. He never looked at me the way he looks at you, she said without bitterness. Like you are the sun after a long winter. Later an elder told a story by the fire. When he was finished, he looked at her. Eagle Woman, do you have a story? Haltingly, with Kuruk translating, she told her own story. Of the widow who collapsed in the cold, and the Apache who carried her to shelter. Of how the widow became an eagle, and the warrior taught her how to fly. When she finished, there was a respectful silence. Then the old medicine woman Dahlia spoke. All good stories are true stories, she said. This is a true story. Later, she and Kuruk walked to the edge of the valley under a brilliant canopy of stars. Sometimes I think about my family, she said, not with grief anymore, but with gratitude, for the love they gave me, and for the loss. Why for the loss? He asked. Because it led me here, she said, turning to face him. To you. He took her in his arms. You honor them by living well, he said, by choosing love over fear. Like love, Margaret whispered. Like love, he agreed, and kissed her under the vast western sky. Margaret Sullivan died in the snow that winter. Itsachu, the eagle woman, was born from her ashes. The widow collapsed in the cold, and the Apache carried her to shelter. But in the end, they had carried each other home. Thank you for listening to this story from the Wild West. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect with listeners from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Margaret and Kuruk's journey. What touched your heart in their story? Let me know in the comments.